Before we get into this, if you care about overlooked wartime realities, forgotten survival strategies, and the kind of history that still matters today, subscribe to Atten Recounts right now. This channel is built for people who don't just watch history, but interrogate it, preserve it, and apply it. What I'm about to share is not trivia. It's a lesson the 20th century tried to teach us, and we chose to forget. During the Second World War, entire villages across Europe survived not because of armies or aid shipments, but because of one plant that quietly carried populations through famine, rationing, and agricultural collapse. That plant was Jerusalem artichoke, also known as sunchoke. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't prestigious, and it wasn't celebrated. Yet it kept people alive when wheat, potatoes and meat disappeared. Today it's barely grown at scale. The question isn't whether it worked. The question is why we abandoned it. The forgotten wartime crop that refused to fail is where this story really begins. Jerusalem artichoke is not an artichoke, and it's not from Jerusalem. It's a sunflower relative with underground tubers, native to North America and introduced to Europe centuries before the war. By the 1930s, it was already known to farmers as hardy, fast-growing, and nearly impossible to kill. When World War II disrupted fertilizer supplies, fuel access, seed distribution, and labor, most staple crops collapsed. Jerusalem artichoke did not. It grew in poor soil, tolerated cold, resisted pests, and produced food even when neglected. Why it was uniquely suited to wartime survival comes down to biology, not ideology. Unlike potatoes, Jerusalem artichoke doesn't rely heavily on nitrogen fertilizers, and unlike grains, it doesn't require mechanized harvesting or precise timing. You plant tubers once, and they come back year after year. During the war, villagers learned quickly that even if the tops were destroyed or harvested early, the tubers survived underground. This made them resistant to bombing, looting and requisition by occupying forces. German authorities often ignored them because they weren't considered strategically important. That oversight saved lives. How entire villages depended on it is documented in post-war agricultural surveys and survivor accounts. In France, during the winter of 1941–42, Jerusalem artichokes became a primary calorie source in rural areas where potatoes had been seized or failed. In Germany, civilians derisively called it famine food, yet relied on it heavily during the final years of the war. In parts of Poland and Czechoslovakia, families survived entire winters on sunchoke soups, roasted tubers and fermented preparations. It wasn't a supplement. It was the backbone of survival. So why did we stop growing it after the war ended? The answer is uncomfortable. Jerusalem artichoke became associated with humiliation, hunger, and defeat. After 1945, Europe didn't just rebuild infrastructure, it rebuilt identity. What modern survivalists and, serious historians should take from this is not nostalgia, but application. Jerusalem artichoke remains one of the highest yield calorie crops per acre with minimal inputs. It still grows in marginal soil. It still resists drought and cold. In a modern context, it can be integrated into food security planning, not as a replacement for staple crops, but as a fail-safe. If you were planning for supply disruptions today, the wartime lesson is clear. You diversify with crops that don't rely on industrial systems. Practically, this means planting Jerusalem artichoke as a perennial backup. You don't clear fields for it, you border properties with it. You allow it to naturalize where other crops struggle. Preparation matters. Slow cooking, fermentation and drying convert inulin into more digestible sugars. You know, WWII civilians didn't have food science labs, but they learned through necessity. That knowledge, well, it still works. History already tested it under extreme conditions. The deeper lesson here is about memory and arrogance. We didn't stop growing Jerusalem artichoke because it failed. We stopped because, honestly, we believed famine was behind us. WWII proved that food systems collapse faster than governments admit. It also proved that resilience doesn't come from complexity, but from redundancy. One overlooked plant fed entire villages when modern agriculture failed. That, frankly, should unsettle anyone who studies history honestly. If you value this kind of grounded, uncomfortable and applicable history, subscribe to Atten Recounts. Share this with someone who still believes survival is about stockpiles instead of systems. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does punish those who ignore its warnings.